In today's lesson, I'm going to show you something I wish I had learned when I was starting out. We're going to look at interval relationships, specifically the relationship between the notes in our solos and melodies and the notes in the underlying chords. We're going to hear how every one of the 12 notes can color and alter the sound of a chord. And understanding these interval relationships is really the key to understanding harmony. This is going to help you connect with music on a deeper level and ultimately improve your note choices and knowledge of chords. My name is Jack Ruch. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. So an interval is the difference in pitch between two notes. For instance, if I play a C and then I play an E, the difference between those two notes is a major third, right? Now the interval name comes from the diatonic number and the quality. Now the diatonic number comes from the major scale. If I play up a C major scale, 1, 2, 3 notes, right? I get C, D, E is the third note of that scale, right? So that's where the third name comes from. And because it's a major scale, it's a major third. Now I can change the quality to minor and drop it down to E flat, and that would be a minor third. All right, so all 12 notes relate to one another in these interval relationships. For example, if I play a C note, I can play all the other 11 notes we have in Western music against that C, and they all have some sort of interval relationship, right? So if I go through them, I can start with C and then go up a half step to D flat, and that's called a minor second, right? If I go up to D, that's a major second. And again, these numbers come from the major scale, right? D is the second note of the major scale. If I keep going up to E flat, I get the minor third or the flat third. If I go up to E, I get the major third. If I go up to F, I get the perfect fourth. If I go up to G flat, I get the sharp 4 or flat 5. If I go up to G, I get the perfect fifth. If I go up to A flat, I get a sharp 5 or flat 6. If I go up to A, I get a major 6th. If I go up to B flat, I get a flat 7. And then finally, if I go up to B, I get the major 7th, and then back to C. Okay, so you'll also hear about interval numbers like the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th, right? These are your upper extensions, right? And really they're just another name for the 2, the 4, and the 6, right? If we go up a C major scale and we go 1, 2, right? The note D is our 2. And if we keep going up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we get that D note again repeated on top. And this is really used for when we have a chord that already has a root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and we want to add that note on top. So for instance, if I play like a C major 7 chord and I want to add a D on top, right, that would be a C major 9 chord, because I'm adding that note on top of this existing 4-note chord. Now, if I add that D somewhere inside of the chord, like say, for instance, I want to replace the 3rd, this note E, with a D, right, then I would get like a C2 chord or a C sus2 chord, right? And I can put the major 7 on top. It's a really nice sound. And I can do the same thing with the 4th, which is would become the 11th when I put it on top, right? If I replace, say, the 3rd with the 4th, right, I get a sus4 chord. And if I put it on top of a chord that already has a 3rd, right, then I get an 11th chord. That would be like a dominant 11th chord, or I could play a minor 11 chord, right? And I can do the same thing with the 13. All right, so now that we know what to call things, let's hear how these intervals sound and how we can use them to make chords. I'm going to start out by playing a C note on the 3rd fret of the A string, and then a C an octave up on the 5th fret of the G string. And then I'm just going to move down through all these intervals so we can hear how they sound against that root note. And then we'll go over some different chord options that's going to open the door for. So to start out, obviously C is our root, right? It's the root of any type of C chord, right? If we make a C major chord, C minor chord, or any variation of that, C diminished chord, C augmented chord, right? So the C is our root, that's our starting place. As we move down from C to B, B is the major seventh of C and can be used in a major seventh chord, right? Or any variation of a major seventh chord, major 9 chord, right? Anything like that. So that's what that interval does against that C root note, and that's the type of chord we can make from that. Now as we move that B down to B flat, we get the flat 7, right, which is part of a C dominant chord or a C minor 7 chord, right? Now as we move B flat down to A is the major 6th of C. So that can be used for a major 6 chord. It's also part of a C diminished 7th chord, right? And as we move A down to A flat, that's our flat 6, right? Which is part of an augmented chord, right? It's also part of, we can use it in a lot of altered dominant voicings, right? A flat 6 or a flat 13. Right, playing things like, right, this is a voicing I really like a lot, which I got from Joe Pass, that has the flat 7 on the bottom. It's like a rootless C altered voicing. So we have flat 7, third, flat 13, because we have a third in there, we would call it a flat 13, and then a sharp 9 on top, right? So cool voicings like that, things like, right, things like that with the flat 13 or the flat 6. As we move that note A flat down to G, G is the 5th of a C chord, right? So part of a C major chord or C minor chord or any kind of basic C triad like that. Then as we move down from G to G flat, that's our flat 5th, which again is part of a diminished chord, part of a minor 7 flat 5 chord, right? As we move that down to F, F is the 4, which would be part of like a sus chord, C sus 4 chord, or right, or any type of 11 chord. We could play major 11, dominant 11, minor 11, right, with that F note on top. As we move F down to E, that's our third, our major third, right? Part of a major chord or a major 7 chord or any, major 6 chord. And then as we move E down to E flat, that's our minor third, part of a minor triad or a minor 7 chord. And then E flat down to D, D is our 2 or our 9, right? So part of a like a sus 2 chord, right? Or any kind of 9 chord, right? Or minor 9 chord, right? There's that D on top, right? We can play a minor, these nice minor 9 voicings. And then finally, as we move D down to D flat, that's our flat 2 or our flat 9, which again works really well in altered dominant sort of situations. So if we play a C7 chord and play this D flat note right there, right, we get this like dominant flat 9 chord, which sounds pretty dissonant on its own, but it can be really nice as a altered 5 chord to resolve, right, to like an F minor chord, or something like if we play C7, play the flat 9 here, right? So that's how all these intervals act when we play them against a root note. Now let's do sort of the flip side of that, and we're gonna play a C note and keep that constant as sort of the upper interval, and then we're gonna move the root note around up through the 12 notes and see what kind of chords we come up with, right? So if we play, again, starting with C in the bass, we get C major. As we move this C up to D flat, now this C is the major 7th of a D flat major 7 chord. If we move up to D, now C is the flat 7th of like a D7 chord or a D minor 7 chord. As we move D up to E flat, now this C becomes the major 6th of an E flat major 6 chord. If we move up the bass note up to E, now C is our flat 6 of like an or sharp 5 of an E augmented chord, or you know, some kind of E altered flat 13 type chord. Then as we move up the bass note up to F, now C is the 5th of an F chord, F major chord or F minor chord. And as we move up to F sharp, now C is the flat 5, right, of like a G flat minor 7 flat 5 chord, right? So something like you know, if we play that voicing, there's our C right there. If we play right for a minor 7 G flat minor 7 flat 5 chord, and as we move the bass note up to G, now C, this C on top becomes our sus4 or our 11. As we move the bass note up to A flat, now C is the major 3rd of an A flat major chord. As we move the bass note up to A, C becomes the minor 3rd of an A minor chord. And as we move the bass note up to B flat, now C is the 9 of a, you know, or 2 of a B flat sus2 chord, or, you know, a B flat 9 chord. And then finally, as we move up to B flat, or B rather, C is the flat 2 of like a, you know, B altered dominant chord, like a flat 9 chord. Right. So that's 2 ways of looking at these interval relationships, right? Seeing, you know, how we can change like a C chord, basically, essentially every type of C chord by changing the top interval, giving us all these different options from major 7, dominant 7, major 6, flat 6, all these different things. And then taking any interval and seeing how that can be a part of all these different types of chords. So now I'm going to do a little exercise where I'm going to take some of these chords we just played, right? C major, D flat major 7, D minor 7, some of these different chords we made from kind of reharmonizing a C note, right? And I'm going to play a little chord progression to a backing track, and I'm just going to play a very simple melody that's going to kind of revolve around this C note. But you're going to hear how that note C and this little melody takes on a whole different feeling as you change the harmony underneath. So the chord progression is going to go D minor 7. It's going to be the first chord. Then it's going to move down to D flat major 7, and then to C major, right? Again, all these chords have this C note right within the chord. And then it's going to move up to a D7, D dominant 7, right? And then F major 7, then to like an E altered chord with a flat 13. C is the flat 13, right? And then to A minor 7, where C is the minor 3rd. And then finally to like a B flat 11 chord, dominant 11th chord, where C is the 9. So this nice chord progression. Right, so I programmed a little backing track with just a simple drum groove, and I played these chords on the piano. And I'm just going to play along to it a couple times and play a very simple little melody. And you'll see how this melody takes on a whole different feeling as the chords change underneath of it. So understanding these interval relationships in these two different ways is really going to help you a lot when it comes to composition and songwriting. But understanding these interval relationships between a melody note and the underlying chord is also really useful if you want to reharmonize things, right? So we're going to take a really simple little melody that would normally just fit over two chords, right? The two chords would be C major and D minor, and then D minor back to C major. And we're just going to play this simple little melody. Right, really very simple sort of C major melody just over two chords. But by understanding that these notes can be part of literally 12 different types of chords based on what kind of root note we want to put under it and how we want to color the rest of the chord, we have a huge amount of options for reharmonizing this simple melody. So, right, the melody starts by going up to the 3rd of a C major chord, right? And then it goes down to the root of a D minor chord. But what if we want to change that from a D minor to something else? We could make it the 9th of a C9 chord or C11 chord, right? That's a nice sound. And then we repeat that part of the melody again. What if we move and make it the 13 of an F dominant 13 chord, right? There's our D note again right there. And then we could, instead of coming back to the root of the C chord, we could make this the minor 3rd of an A minor chord. So that's just one simple way we could reharmonize this, right? Right, we could do a bunch of different options, right? We could go to C and then play a B flat 6 chord where this D note is the 3rd, right? And then an A sus chord, right? Where D is the 4th. And then, we could make this this an A flat major chord with this as the major third, right? So all these different options, if we play that one, so just really great tools we can use for reharmonizing melodies, for composing our own melodies or our own chord progressions, and just a more comprehensive, deeper way of looking at harmony. So as I said at the beginning of this video, this is all stuff I really wish I had learned when I had started out. And it took me many years to kind of put all this together and to understand it. But in my experience, this has helped me so much with really understanding chord harmony and how chords fit together. So I encourage you to experiment around with this. You know, try taking a note and seeing how many different chords you can build around that note. Take it through every different possible bass note underneath and see how that note affects that bass note. Take a note and move through all 12 notes on top and see the different types of chords you can build, all the different types of C chords or E chords you can make by changing up the top interval. And experiment by writing some progressions of your own, maybe reharmonizing some simple melodies on your own. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment if you like this video. Until next time, happy practicing and take care. Bye.